The sun bore down mercilessly on the city, its rays reflecting off the asphalt and making the heat feel even more unbearable. The streets hummed with the energy of the busy city, the constant honking of cars, the hurried footsteps of pedestrians, and the endless stream of vehicles rushing to and fro. In the midst of it all, a woman sat in a wheelchair at the edge of the sidewalk in front of Region International Holdings. Her frail, weathered hands gripped the armrests of the chair as she watched the chaos unfold around her. Despite the world moving at full speed, she was stationary, left alone in the crowd. Her eyes followed the hopeful job seekers walking past her. They were all sharply dressed, clutching resumes and talking nervously to each other. She could see their excitement, their determination to make a change in their lives. The company was holding interviews that day, and she knew how much it meant for those seeking employment. They were in a rush, their faces filled with expectation, but no one paid her any attention, not a single glance or a moment of kindness. For nearly an hour, the woman had sat quietly, observing the steady flow of people going in and out of the building. She felt invisible, an unnoticed part of the world that carried on with its busy rhythms. The honking horns, the noise of passing trucks, and the conversations of job applicants all blurred together into an overwhelming cacophony. She squinted as a truck sped by, sending a gust of hot air against her face. Her cheeks burned, and she closed her eyes momentarily before reopening them, determined not to give up. With a soft tremble in her hands, she lifted her arm and called out to a man in a navy blue suit walking briskly by. "Please," she called, her voice nearly drowned out by the noise of the city. "Can you help me cross the road?" But the man didn't stop, his eyes fixed ahead. He adjusted his tie and quickened his pace, disappearing into the building without sparing a second glance. The rejection hit her hard, but she gathered herself, trying again. The woman watched as the crowd continued to surge around her. She turned her head toward a group of 3 people, a man and 2 women, deep in conversation, their voices low but eager. Perhaps they would hear her this time. "Excuse me," she called once more, her voice soft and strained. "Can someone help me cross the road?" The group slowed down, but only the woman in the black dress met her gaze. For a moment, it seemed like she might offer help, but the woman simply shook her head. "We need to hurry," she said. "The gate is closing soon." With that, the group continued on without another word, leaving the woman to watch them walk away. A heavy weight settled in the woman's chest. Every passing second felt like an eternity. She could feel the eyes of strangers glancing in her direction, some lingering for a moment, then quickly looking away. It was as if they could not be bothered to offer even the smallest bit of help. She sighed deeply, adjusting her position in the wheelchair to ease the ache in her back. The world continued its fast-paced rhythm, and she, alone in her stillness, was forgotten. The sun seemed to intensify with each passing minute, and the hustle of the city felt suffocating. She could hear the distant murmur of the crowd entering Region International Holdings for the job interviews, their steps quick and eager. But she felt as though she was drifting further away from the energy of the world around her. With each passing second, more people passed by, all of them absorbed in their own lives. Some of them cast brief glances in her direction, but no one stopped. A man in a white shirt and black trousers approached, his folder tightly clutched under his arm. He looked at her briefly, but without hesitation, he adjusted his grip on the folder and walked past her. A woman in high heels paused for a fraction of a second, her gaze flickering toward the woman in the wheelchair. Then she shook her head. "Not today," she muttered, resuming her hurried pace. The woman sat quietly, the weight of indifference pressing down on her chest. She didn't expect anyone to stop, but the sting of rejection was sharper than ever. Her throat felt dry, and her hands trembled as she gripped the wheelchair. The heat was oppressive, and the air around her felt thick with the tension of the city. She could feel the emptiness surrounding her, an invisible wall that kept her separate from everyone else. People continued to rush by, their lives moving forward while she was left behind. It was a cruel feeling, one that she knew well, but that never became easier to bear. She tried to swallow the lump in her throat, but couldn't. She had been here too long, and no one had bothered to stop. She watched as more people arrived for the interviews. Some were alone, others in pairs, all with a sense of urgency. The woman felt a pang of jealousy for their opportunities, for the hope they held in their hands. They were part of a world that seemed to have no room for her, a world that was too busy to notice someone who had nothing to offer but a simple plea for help. She could feel the ache in her chest deepening, but she wasn't ready to give up. She wasn't ready to be invisible forever. The woman's eyes scanned the crowd, hoping for a glimmer of kindness, a single person who might see her and offer help. Time seemed to stretch on endlessly. She could feel the fatigue settling in, her body aching from the long wait, but she forced herself to remain alert. She needed to try one more time. With all the strength she had left, she called out once more, her voice soft but desperate. "Please," she said, "can someone help me?" But again, no one stopped. A few people glanced her way, but their gazes quickly shifted elsewhere. The city was alive, but it was as though she no longer existed. The last wave of applicants rushed toward the building's gates, all intent on the interviews ahead. It felt like the final blow, the moment she realized just how little the world cared. She had become a part of the background noise, an invisible figure in the rush of life. As the last of the applicants disappeared through the gates, the woman's heart sank. She was exhausted, emotionally drained, and filled with the heavy weight of being ignored. She had spent the day hoping for something that never came. It was as though the world had turned its back on her, leaving her alone with her thoughts and the harsh reality of her situation. She tried to push the tears back, but they were already threatening to fall. She was used to being overlooked, but today, the cruelty of being invisible felt sharper than ever. The street was quieter now, the rush of people and cars slowly fading into the distance. The woman looked around at the empty sidewalk and sighed deeply. She had tried everything, and yet, she was still alone. She couldn't help but wonder if there was any kindness left in the world. If there was anyone left who still cared. Just as the woman was about to accept the painful reality of her isolation, something unexpected happened. The sound of footsteps grew louder, and a figure appeared in her peripheral vision. A young woman dressed in a simple navy blue blouse and a black skirt slowed as she approached. The woman in the wheelchair's heart skipped a beat. She didn't want to hope again, didn't want to feel the sting of disappointment, but something about the young woman's presence felt different. To her surprise, the young woman stopped. She turned toward the woman in the wheelchair, her gaze meeting hers with genuine concern. The woman felt a lump rise in her throat, a mixture of disbelief and gratitude. This wasn't just someone passing by. For the first time that day, someone saw her. The young woman knelt down beside the wheelchair, her expression soft and compassionate. "Do you need help?" she asked gently, her voice warm and sincere. The woman in the wheelchair blinked in surprise, not quite sure how to respond. She hadn't expected anyone to stop, let alone offer help. But here this woman was, offering her the very thing she had been asking for all day. "Yes," the woman whispered, her voice barely audible. "I need to." The young woman smiled and reached out to help, offering her a steady hand. "I'll help you," she said, her voice reassuring. The woman felt a surge of gratitude, a mix of emotions flooding her chest. For the first time that day, she wasn't invisible. She was seen. With gentle care, the young woman helped the woman in the wheelchair cross the street, her pace slow and steady. The woman in the wheelchair felt the warmth of her touch, the kindness radiating from her, and she realized something she hadn't thought about all day. Kindness was still possible. It wasn't just something of the past, something lost in the rush of life. It was here, in this moment, embodied by a stranger who had stopped to help her when no one else would. As they reached the other side of the street, the woman in the wheelchair felt a sense of relief, not just physically, but emotionally. She had been seen. She had been helped. The weight that had settled on her heart seemed to lift, if only a little. The world was still cruel at times, but in this brief moment, there was hope. The young woman didn't leave immediately. Instead, she stayed for a moment longer, chatting with the woman in the wheelchair. "What's your name?" she asked, smiling warmly. The woman hesitated, unsure of what to say, but then she spoke softly. "Lily," she replied. "And you?" The young woman smiled again. I'm Anna. There was something about her calm presence that made Lily feel comfortable. Something in her eyes that suggested understanding, kindness, and empathy. Over the next few days, Lily found herself reflecting more on that brief encounter with Anna. It had been a fleeting moment, but it had left a lasting impression. For the first time in a long time, Lily started to feel like she wasn't completely invisible. She had spent so many years in the shadows, hoping for a glimmer of connection, but every time she reached out, she had been met with rejection. Now, thanks to Anna, something inside her had shifted. Maybe the world wasn't as cold as it seemed. Maybe kindness still existed, just waiting for the right moment to show itself. Lily found herself looking at the world around her differently. She began to notice the small gestures of kindness that had once gone unnoticed. The person who smiled at her on the bus, the stranger who helped her pick up dropped items, the occasional conversation with a passerby. These moments, once overlooked, now felt like threads connecting her to a world that had seemed indifferent. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to give her hope. As the days passed, Lily found herself reflecting more on that brief encounter with Anna. It had been a fleeting moment, but it had left a lasting impression. For the first time in a long time, Lily started to feel like she wasn't completely invisible. She had spent so many years in the shadows, hoping for a glimmer of connection, but every time she reached out, she had been met with rejection. Now, thanks to Anna, something inside her had shifted. Maybe the world wasn't as cold as it seemed. Maybe kindness still existed, just waiting for the right moment to show itself. Lily found herself looking at the world around her differently. She began to notice the small gestures of kindness that had once gone unnoticed. The person who smiled at her on the bus, the stranger who helped her pick up dropped items, the occasional conversation with a passerby. These moments, once overlooked, now felt like threads connecting her to a world that had seemed indifferent. It wasn't perfect, but it was enough to give her hope. A few days later, Lily was sitting in her usual spot, waiting for something, anything, that might spark a new connection. She didn't expect much, but she had learned that sometimes the unexpected happened. As the crowd moved past her, she spotted a familiar face. It was Anna. She was walking with purpose, but when she saw Lily, her expression softened. "Hi, Lily," Anna said with a smile, approaching her wheelchair. "I've been thinking about you." Lily's heart skipped a beat. "You've been thinking about me?" she asked, surprised. "Yes," Anna replied, sitting down beside her. "I wanted to make sure you were okay, and I thought maybe we could meet up sometime, get a coffee or something." Lily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Someone who barely knew her, wanted to spend time with her. It was a simple gesture, but it was everything. She felt a warmth spreading through her chest, something that hadn't been there for a long time. The coffee shop they met at was cozy, the aroma of fresh brews filling the air. They sat across from each other at a small table, and Lily felt an unfamiliar sense of ease. Anna asked her questions about her life, her past, her hopes for the future. Lily was surprised at how open she felt, how natural the conversation flowed. Anna listened intently, her eyes never leaving Lily's face, making her feel seen in a way that hadn't happened before. As they shared stories, Lily learned that Anna had grown up in a small town and moved to the city in search of opportunity, just like many of the people Lily had seen rushing into Region International Holdings. But Anna had not found success in the same way. She too had struggled, faced rejection, and felt isolated at times. The similarities between their lives were striking, and Lily felt a deep sense of connection. Over the next few weeks, Anna and Lily continued to meet regularly. They would sit in cafes, walk around the park, or simply talk. Lily's world was gradually changing. She had spent so much of her life waiting for someone to see her, but now she had found someone who not only saw her, but genuinely cared. Anna encouraged Lily to pursue things she had once thought were beyond her reach, applying for jobs, taking part in community events, and reaching out to others. The more they talked, the more Lily realized that her life didn't have to be confined to the wheelchair. She could do so much more, not just for herself, but for others as well. Anna shared her own experiences with self-doubt and how she had learned to overcome it. "We all face rejection," Anna said one day. "But that doesn't define us. It's how we rise from it that counts." Lily began to believe this, slowly. She wasn't just the woman in the wheelchair anymore. She was someone with dreams, with stories to tell, and with a future ahead of her. One afternoon, while they were walking in the park, Lily spotted a young girl sitting alone on a bench. Her eyes were red from crying, and she seemed lost in her own world. Lily's heart went out to her. Without thinking, she wheeled her chair toward the girl, and Anna followed quietly behind. "Are you okay?" Lily asked gently, her voice soft but filled with empathy. The girl looked up, startled, and wiped her eyes. She seemed hesitant to speak at first, but Lily smiled reassuringly. "It's okay. You can talk if you want, or if you just need someone to listen." The girl finally spoke, sharing her story of feeling overwhelmed by the pressures of life and the uncertainty of the future. Lily listened intently, just as Anna had listened to her. It felt good to offer the same kindness she had received. The girl smiled through her tears, and for a brief moment, it felt like everything had come full circle. Lily realized that helping others, even in small ways, had become a source of strength for her. It wasn't just about being helped, it was about being able to help someone else too. She began volunteering at a local community center, offering support to others who, like her, had felt forgotten or overlooked. It wasn't easy at first. There were days when the weight of her own struggles felt overwhelming, but as she helped others find their way, she also found healing for herself. Anna continued to support her, and their bond grew stronger. They became more than just friends. They were partners in giving back to the community. Together, they organized events, assisted in job training programs, and created spaces where people could share their stories and support one another. One day, while volunteering at a job fair, Lily spotted a familiar face in the crowd, one of the applicants she had watched so many times before, years ago, as she sat on the curb outside Region International Holdings. This time, the woman was walking confidently, carrying a folder in one hand, a clear sense of purpose in her stride. Lily felt a rush of emotion. She had watched the woman from afar, but now she had an opportunity to make a difference. She approached her and offered help. To her surprise, the woman smiled and accepted, just as Lily had once hoped someone would do for her. In that moment, Lily realized how much had changed. She wasn't just the woman who had been ignored in the past. She was someone who could help others feel seen, valued, and cared for. It was a small but significant victory, one that had been years in the making. Lily continued her journey of giving back and connecting with others. Her life was no longer defined by isolation and rejection, but by the kindness she had received and shared. She had come full circle, from a woman in a wheelchair feeling invisible, to someone who made a difference in the lives of others. With Anna by her side and the community she had built, Lily had found her purpose. As she sat in a cafe one afternoon, reflecting on how far she had come, Lily realized that every small act of kindness, every moment when someone chose to see another person, had the power to change lives. The world wasn't as cold as she had once believed. It was filled with people, like Anna, who were willing to stop and offer help, to make someone feel seen. And that, she realized, was the true power of compassion.